F is for fraud, the art of deceit. And it's not so nice to be labeled a cheat. F is also for France and female, so let me introduce today's hero, Jeanne Saint-Remy. I'm Indy Neidell, and this is the World Dictionary, today featuring Jeanne Saint-Remy. She certainly had a checkered life, though she died at the age of just 35. She also managed to make a pretty bad name for herself and gained plenty of notoriety. But was she a dick? Jeanne de Valois Saint-Remy was born in 1756 in northeastern France. Her family was destitute, and Jeanne was one of 6 children, 3 of whom died in infancy. Her father, Jacques, was a drunk, but a drunk who claimed to be a Valois, a direct descendant of an illegitimate son of King Henry II. But still a drunk. Jeanne begged for food as a child, which had to be worse in 1760s France than, say, now. But she at least survived, and things took a turn for the better when a genealogist said, yeah, those guys are in fact real Valois. See, there was a fund to help children from poor nobility, so she got a stipend and was sent to a boarding school. After that, she was to be sent to a nunnery to prevent further Valois from arriving. But instead, she and her sister took refuge with the Sermon family, and in 1780, Jeanne married a Sermon nephew, Nicolas de la Motte. Just by total sheer coincidence, she happened to be 8 months pregnant at the time of the wedding. She had twins, but they unfortunately survived only a few days. You sometimes forget some of the real awful sides of life in earlier times. Anyhow, Nicolas and Jeanne began calling themselves Comte and Comtesse de la Motte Valois because there was no Wikipedia or anything for people to check.
Oh, greetings, it is I, the Count, and it's time to answer that fascinating question.
What is that guy the Count of anyway? He's just the Count, right? Like the mooch. There's a footnote in history for you. Well, Nicolas and Jeanne lived beyond their means. She wanted an extravagant life, and their money just wouldn't cover it. She figured, though, she could get a more generous pension because of her royal blood by appealing to the Queen, Marie Antoinette. So she hung around Versailles trying to get to meet her. Seriously, you could actually do this back then if you looked good enough, if you were dressed right. You could hang around the palace and the palace gardens. So there were some okay sides to earlier times, too. Thing is, the Queen didn't want to meet her. This, of course, didn't stop Jeanne from lying to people, or more like hinting to people, that she and the Queen were best buds. People wanted to hang out with ladies that were best buds with the Queen. And guess what? They were also willing to part with some cash, too. The French court then was awash with infighting and innuendo in an endless struggle to become the royals' favorite, and people would happily pay to piggyback on your supposed connections. One such person was Cardinal Prince Louis de Rohan. One such person was Cardinal Prince Louis de Rohan. Now, his family was extremely wealthy and all, and he was a cardinal, of course, too. He was also a slave to the pleasures of the flesh, and Jeanne became his lover. Now, he was a very good fish for her. See, he had insulted Maria Theresa, Marie Antoinette's mother, years ago in a letter that Marie Antoinette had seen, and had apparently tried to prevent Marie from marrying King Louis XVI. So, Marie Antoinette did not want anything to do with him. He very much wanted to win her favor and become one of the king's ministers. With some forged letters from another lover, Jeanne got Rohan to send the Queen money for her charity work, which went straight to Jeanne's pockets, and she worked her way further into respectable society. But this was just peanuts, and now I'm going to sidetrack you with a different story. In 1772, King Louis XV of France wanted to make a necklace for his mistress, Madame du Barry, and not just any necklace, the mother of all necklaces. So he asked Parisian jewelers Baumer and Bastian to put the best necklace ever together, right? However, it would take several years, and they'd have to lay out a lot of cash to find the right diamonds for the necklace. But Louis died of smallpox in 1774, and du Barry was banished from the court. So the jewelers, who had never received an official commission, tried to sell it to Louis XVI, who did actually offer it to Marie Antoinette as a present, but she refused it and said the money would be better spent equipping a warship. Now, I should point out that France had economic woes at the time, and they probably couldn't have bought it anyway had they wanted to. The jewelers got pretty desperate after this, since they had mortgaged everything to make the damn necklace, and now they were stuck with it. Jeanne fit very nicely into this situation. or I wouldn't be talking about the necklace. Things got really heavy when the Queen sent letters to Rohan with such a warm tone that he actually got a crush and asked Jeanne to obtain a nighttime interview for him with Her Majesty. In August 1784, this meeting took place at night in the garden of the Palace of Versailles. Well, this meeting was Rohan meeting with a prostitute Jeanne had hired for her resemblance to the Queen. But yeah, same thing, right? The meeting went well, considering Rohan, who had met the real Queen, did not spot the imposter. So, in January 1785, Jeanne told Rohan that Marie wanted to buy the necklace but couldn't do it publicly in a time of national economic woe. And would the cardinal act as intermediary? He said no. Of course he didn't say no. He negotiated the purchase with the jewelers on behalf of the Queen, took the necklace to Jeanne's house, where it was given to the Queen's valet, who was of course not the Queen's valet, and Nicolas de la Motte, remember him? Nicolas de la Motte took it to London and began selling off the diamonds. Well, you can guess what happened next. Well, after a few months. The jewelers wanted the Queen to pay. The Queen said, "I never ordered the damn necklace." And when Rohan was taken before the King and gave the King the Queen's letters signed Marie Antoinette de France, the King grew furious that the Cardinal had fallen for it since royalty did not sign their last names to letters. Oh, Columbo would have totally spotted that right away.
Oh, one more thing, sir. We got something else on the gun. Did I mention that?
No, you didn't. What, Lieutenant?
He was also furious that Rohan couldn't tell a prostitute from his Queen. So Rohan was arrested, Jeanne was arrested, the prostitute was arrested, the fake valet forger lover was arrested, and Nicholas wisely remained in London. Also arrested was Count Cagliostro, an occultist and shady character. Because you gotta arrest those guys. I mean, you just gotta. Here's the rub. Louis could have handled this quietly, but he didn't. He wanted his wife to be vindicated, and this backfired spectacularly. The trial was a sensation, and the Queen's name was dragged through the mud, her morality called into question. See, Rohan's charge was disrespect for the Queen for thinking she'd meet him at midnight. He was acquitted, and the court said, yeah, it was reasonable to expect such a thing, which was a huge insult to Marie Antoinette. Actually, her reputation would never really recover. Many people also thought she had orchestrated the whole thing because she didn't like Rohan. And people thought his acquittal meant that somehow she was in the wrong. Her popularity went into steep decline, and the image of Marie Antoinette as a vain and manipulative spendthrift was cemented in the minds of the French people. This was a key event in the decline of the Bourbon monarchy that led to the French Revolution a few years later. As for Jeanne, she was found guilty, was whipped and branded publicly, and imprisoned for life. She escaped though, disguised as a boy, and made her way to London and published her memoirs, which cast blame for everything on Marie Antoinette. She died... No, I'm not going to tell you that just yet. First, it's time to see how much of a dick she was. On the achievement scale, she survived infancy. She actually managed to survive to adulthood and get an education against the odds. She even made it into Paris high society, which was her goal, and she gave us a great story of scandal. On the downside, that's not actually an achievement. She used forgery and deceit as her main MO. That's kind of a 0.5 on the achievement scale because let's face it, she didn't give anything to the world other than a good story. And in terms of being a dick, there's that forgery and deceit as her main MO thing. She ruined and even ended the lives of those she involved in her schemes. With total disregard for the truth, she destroyed her Queen's reputation for personal gain. She bankrupted jewelers who acted in good faith. She was the catalyst for one of the main events that led to the dissatisfaction of the people that culminated in the French Revolution, which, say what you will about its final effect, destroyed her social class and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Still, she didn't do that on purpose, and her dickishness only directly ruined a dozen or so lives, which is still pretty bad, so give her a 1 on the dick scale, and she ends up at 0.75 overall, making her a third-class dick at the low end of the scale. And now, here's what happened to her after the scandal.